Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Laplace. Thank you for joining us on the second day of the 14th Annual LASC Student Conference at the University of Maryland College Park. Today, we will begin with Job Talk Interrupted, Reimagining Possibilities with the Ph.D., featuring Dr. Lisa Carney, the Post-doctoral Associate for the Latin American Studies Center, as well as the coordinator of the Dissertation Success Program for the Graduate School Writing Center. She received her PhD in May 2020 from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese at the University of Maryland, where she specialized in indigenous cultural production, contemporary Latin American literature, and Quechua language narrative from the Andes and Amazon region. Her dissertation, By the Authority of Dreams, Truth and Knowledge in Quechua Musque Narratives, examines how verbal artistry and linguistic elements contribute to credibility and authoritative knowledge in Quechua-speaking communities of the equatorial tropical forests. Welcome, Lisa, and take it away.
Thank you. Let's see. I want to make sure I have my screen available for you. So I'm excited to talk to you all today. Let's see, I'm going to do my new share. Can you see my screen now? Let me know if at any time I switch off and you can't see my screen. Perfect. So today I'm going to be talking about jobs. It's a job talk with a little bit more literal lean to it. And it's going to be pretty conversational in some parts. I'm going to start with more of the personal reflection, and then I hope toward the end to involve the audience more. So definitely let me know as you're going along, topics that come up, things you'd like to hear more about. You can go ahead and type those in the Q&A function, and also you can raise your hand and we can allow you to speak, because I really want this to be interactive as well. So as many of you know, I am the postdoctoral associate at the Latin American Studies Center, and the third in about 5 years. And typically in the past, the postdocs have given a talk about their research. And this has served as a sample job talk for an academic job position. If you aren't aware of how the process works, for an academic interview for a tenure-track job, you will have a screening interview. And then if you make it past that screening interview, they will often invite you to do a campus visit, which is also now currently something that's done online. And as part of that visit, you typically give a talk about your research for a general audience. And so this year, as I started off the year, I was thinking, you know, what's going to happen? What's the job market going to look like? Will I do these job talks? And as the year went on, I started thinking, you know, maybe if this job talk can really be not a sample research talk, but a talk about the jobs that this talk is preparing you for. So I'll say, I graduate, this is me and my wonderful committee. You might recognize some of those people. It's March 12th, 2020, the last day that the University of Maryland was fully open. So immediately the day after I defended, the university shut down, and we started to see things about the hiring freezes and a lot of uncertainty as time went on. Are you not able to see the photo? Okay, now you can see it. I see. Thank you. That's great. So this is my committee, and so then over the past year, we've been seeing a lot of headlines like this. This one's actually very recent, from the Brown student newspaper. Graduate students face bleak job market among nationwide university hiring freezes. Now, I was really fortunate because very early on after graduating, I received the great news that I would have this postdoc position. And so I knew I had a year, and also early on we thought maybe this will be over. This pandemic will clear up in the summer. Summer turned to fall. And so I started going to all of these career services events that are offered by the University of Maryland's graduate student career services. And they were events that were focused for PhD students and recent graduates. There was a very clear message that I was getting there. And I was getting this message also from higher ed publications and from professors I respected. And they were all saying the same thing. Now's the time to look outside academia. There are not enough jobs, and we don't know when these jobs are going to be coming back. And this was in a similar vein to talks to things I've been hearing before, but it was a much stronger message than ever. So, you know, I spent this past year in the wonderful position of working with a lot of graduate students in different stages of their careers. Some of them, you know, beginning the master's degree, especially when I'm talking about the Latin American studies community. But also, as part of my postdoc, I've facilitated the Dissertation Success Support Program at the Graduate School Writing Center. So I've been working with dozens of graduate students who are writing their dissertations, some of them very, you know, defending right now or have defended in the past month. And they would tell me their concerns about their future employment. We'd be talking about the writing, and sometimes writing was really hindered by the prospects, you know, people making very difficult calculations. Should I defend now or should I delay and see if the job market's better next year? If I'm not going to get an academic job, should I finish writing this dissertation at all? How do I talk to my advisor about these concerns I'm having? I don't want them to be upset with me. And so these are things that I started to pay attention to. And although I didn't conduct a qualitative study, so today I'm not here to present those findings about those conversations, I did start to notice trends that probably would not surprise a lot of people. And so, let's see, I'm going to give me a second to, thank you for your patience while I deal with this little technical difficulty here. My script disappeared. Another disruption. That's why you have a hard copy backup, which is perfect. So disruptions like these, like you see right here, can provoke a lot of feelings in people. And this is what I was hearing from students this year. And I felt a lot of these feelings too. Some of it's frustration, some of it's denial, some of it is sort of a sense of sadness. But to be honest, I also felt a little relieved because for the first time, I felt like I had this really solid permission from whom, I don't know, maybe just me, to look beyond the tenure track marketplace that I had been anticipating entering for the prior decade. And really that relief didn't stem from not wanting those jobs. I still wanted those jobs, but there's this relief that, you know, maybe I won't have to suffer sort of the indignities of stitched together employment that so far I had seen a lot of PhD graduates do. A lot of finding classes here and there to teach, finding one-year positions in places they really didn't want to live, trying to do something while keeping their hopes of publishing alive. And so seeing that the market was so bleak sort of said to me, oh, maybe, you know, those aren't even going to be there. Maybe I don't have to put up with those less desirable things. But I also wasn't going to give up on the tenure track as an option for my professional future. I just decided, let's broaden the scope of what I'm looking for. And so the idea was, for me, really give yourself as many options as possible. What I have been learning this year as I've been talking to a lot of people is there are a lot of stories that students believe, whether or not they actually really, you know, whether or not they're based on fact. So here are some stories that students and often faculty also believe going into their PhD. They say, after I get a PhD, I'll apply for an academic track job. If I've done all the right things, I will get a job. That means I have to be maybe perfect. If I've done almost all the right things, so if I'm not quite perfect, maybe it'll take me a couple of years. And if I failed to do all of the right things, I will find this out probably through failure. There's a lot in these stories that has to do with imposter feelings, feeling like maybe I'm tricking people. So students will sort of say like, oh, I don't know if I'm really good enough for this. They've passed all these obstacles and jumped over so many hurdles and proven themselves time and time again, but think maybe they have failed and that they're going to find out the failure in sort of a public way with not having much, after they've put in a lot of effort. And hearing these stories, hearing people talk, I have talked people through these ideas, but what's always really stuck out to me is how many doctors of philosophy feel like they're failing or feel negative feelings when they've done something that only 1.2% of the US population can claim. And I'm sure it's much smaller for the worldwide population. So achieving this great thing felt like a limitation and felt negative instead of something positive and like you have more opportunities. So given my background, I decided I started to think about things in terms of narrative. So I'm going to switch gears a little bit and tell you a little bit about what my job talk might have been like in a different setting. Here are some photos of me conducting research in Ecuador in the tropical forest. On the top left, I am actually getting to help the acclaimed linguist Peter Moiskin, who's a really top scholar on Quechua languages, as he interviews a Quechua-speaking woman. And then I conducted my own research working with Quechua speakers. Quechua is a language, the name of the language of the Quechua language family that is spoken in Ecuador, and there are several different varieties. Some are spoken in the highlands, and there are a few varieties spoken in the lowlands, the tropical lowlands. So this is a language that I studied, and in my interviews, as you see me, that's the back of my head on the right, talking to one of my main informants, my main collaborators, Belgica Dawa. When I started working with Quechua populations, but coming from a Spanish department literature background, I really focused on narratives and the stories that people tell. And one of the types of stories that really stuck out to me very early on were dream narratives, which are very complicated. They have this really incredible verbal artistry. There is a storytelling attitude. There are gestures and tone of voice and sounds and all this amazing artistry that really breaks with established ideas of what is literature, for example. What am I doing studying verbal artistry in a literature department? So sort of breaking through that. And I also noticed that the types of stories that were really interesting to me, these dream stories, had a lot of power to them based off of what was different about how people understand dreams and where their meaning comes from. So I'll give you an example. If I dream about my brother and I tell you about this dream with my brother, you all, coming from a certain educated background, formally educated background, will probably think one of a few things. You'll probably think, well, this just has to do with Lisa's thoughts and feelings about her brother, or this has to do with her own preoccupations, or maybe she talked to her brother on the phone the other day and it's just part of her memory consolidation. You're not going to think much more beyond that. But if I tell this story about my brother to someone like Belgica, who's in this photo, she's going to think that, my brother was thinking about me, and that I started to dream because he was thinking about me. So the way she interprets this story that I might tell has a lot to do with these sociocultural understandings of what dreams are, and how she'll interpret the story has to do with these established narratives that she's come to understand. And so in a nutshell, people worldwide interpret their dreams and turn them into narratives based on a set of expectations. that they have about where those stories can go and what those stories mean. Now, how am I going to relate this to jobs? I'll take it in another direction, a little bit more closely related to Spanish literature, which is the department I came in. And I'm going to ask you to imagine I give you a short story to read, all right? And in the short story, there's a young boy and he lives in a house. He passes most of the day alone. It's an old family house. And at some point, this little boy starts to hear voices coming from the attic and decides to explore. So here we have a visual. This little boy goes up into the attic. Now, what's going to happen next? What do you think is going to happen next? Take a second to reflect on that. Now, your story, your idea of what's going to happen next is going to be influenced by the stories you've heard and read and genres that you're interested in. So if I tell you that this is a short story written by a Latin American cuentista from the 21st century, that might start to prime you to have a certain type of expectation, right? Maybe if it's magical realism, there's some skeletons of great-great-grandparents in the audience, in the attic, and they're still alive somehow, like magically speaking, in there. But if maybe we're talking about a post-dictatorial collection of short stories, maybe it's someone hiding out from a dictatorship. So maybe it's very realistic. Maybe it's a fantastic genre and we don't really know who the voices belong to. A little bit of the La Casa Tomada by Julio Cortázar. Maybe, so maybe we don't find out. Maybe it's an alien, maybe it's the radio. But we have some ideas in mind when I set you up this way. We have some ideas of how this is going to end, right? So again, we tell stories and we use stories and what we expect to make sense of the events. And I'm bringing all of these things up because I want us to think about the stories we tell ourselves about jobs and what you can do with a PhD. I'm going to turn the screen blank for a second. So what I have seen talking to these students, as I said, is these stories that PhD students and recent grads are telling themselves, and it has a lot to do with what they're able to do with a PhD. If you get a PhD, then what's going to happen next, and what it means if they don't take the job that they are expecting to have next. And I'll say too, I won't just blame it on the other students. I'll say me too. When I started my PhD program at Maryland, I talked to someone who was about to graduate, and she said, "Oh yeah, I'm looking at jobs outside academia." And I kind of went, "Oh, I didn't even know people started PhDs if they were looking for jobs outside of academia in my field," right? Maybe if you're a scientist, but not in the humanities, I sort of thought maybe that's like the one main option. So we have to really work and unpack these narratives that people live by, and a lot of them have to do with feelings of possibly being an imposter. There's some idea that maybe this is really a meritocracy, and a fully straightforward meritocracy where if you work hard enough you definitely will get something, or really maybe this idea that this is a balanced market economy, even though the news, as I showed you earlier, is saying that it's not. But I'm going to give you a goofy analogy to use to think about this. So let's imagine there's a job market, and the jobs are people going to the market, and the job seekers are avocados. All right. So if the supply matched demand, when I go to the market, right, when the buyer goes to the market, some days everyone will get an avocado because supply matches demand, and some people will have to settle for overly ripe avocados, and some will have to settle for green avocados, but a lot of people everyone will get their avocado. That would be maybe a balanced market. But what if there are 10 times more avocados than people who want to buy avocados, right? 10 times more candidates than there are for jobs. Well, how do you pick an avocado in that context? Fortunately, we have search committees that are doing their best to give all the avocados a fair squeeze. Can they possibly do it? It's hard to say. You know, if I'm really talking about avocados and not this analogy, I'm just going to feel a couple and go with the first one that seems okay, that seems good. But does that say anything about the avocados that I don't pick? Probably not, right? So in this very silly analogy, we see that there are a lot of perfectly good avocado PhD candidates that are out there, not getting picked, but thinking, I must be overripe, I must be underripe. And we also have to recognize that the criteria can also become far more subjective, because how do you pick between these beautiful avocados in front of you? The external characteristics are not going to necessarily tell you what's inside. Now, we can also, let's take this avocado roll another way, and let's say that the jobs are the avocados and the PhD candidates are the people at the market. So let's say there's only a few avocados. Here's the other thing that happens is that we go in and I go, oh, I really, really want an avocado, but there's only 2 left, and somebody hands me one and it's a little too ripe. Do I take it? I feel like I should take it. I want an avocado. And this is the other thing that we're seeing a lot with PhD students, friends and students I've worked with, where they kind of go, oh, I don't, it's not a great job. There's a lot of teaching, there's a lot of service. I still am expected to do a lot of publishing, and it's in a place I don't like, but I feel lucky enough to have gotten it. But again, if it were a rotten avocado, would you take it? So why are you interested in taking it for a job? And there are a lot of related narratives that graduate students and PhD degree holders tend to believe. One thing is that they believe that they haven't started their professional career. So to look outside of academia would be starting from ground zero and putting them at the ground level of an undergraduate student. And that's not true, but it has to do with what people think about what their PhD experience has been worth and what it has taught them and what they've been doing. And so I know for myself, I don't exactly remember when it happened, but there was some point when I stopped being confused for an undergraduate on campus, and people started to think, oh, she works here. When I went, oh yeah, I am a professional here. I am a college instructor. And I think teaching does that for a lot of people. So I could start to see myself as a professional. And so I would, those of you who are still waiting to finish your master's degree or your PhD, definitely start to think of yourself as a professional, because you are somebody who researches professionally. You are somebody who knows probably a couple of languages, who writes professionally, edits professionally, does public speaking, advises, mentors. You take complex ideas and you break them down. You balance multiple high stakes projects at once on tight deadlines. These are things that people get paid for. You might not be getting paid for, or you might be paying to do them, but you are still doing these things at a very high level. So going back to this idea of narrative, I was living my life thinking I was in one storyline, and then kind of like a Cortázar story, I found out that, the story I'm reading about myself, I'm actually writing it at the same time. And I want to encourage all of you to recognize that as well. Stop just shopping for avocados and start looking at the other produce. Go explore what's in that attic and find out that it's, a radio somebody left on and not a scary ghost. So what we have to do is change the narrative, right? What's the narrative we're going to have? First of all, I just said getting a PhD is the process of being a professional, and you can absolutely take experiences from a PhD and put them on a resume, and you can get jobs outside of the tenure track. You can apply to a lot of different jobs, and you can do the things that you want to do in a variety of positions. I have not given up on tenure track jobs. I've been applying to them, but I've also been applying to other jobs. And I'll talk in a little bit about what those jobs are and how I found them. But really, this big element of the narrative that has been very common is this idea that there's some sort of reason to be ashamed or feel bad about moving beyond the tenure track. And that's really pervasive in the humanities and probably social sciences as well. In the sciences, I found people are free from this. You know, a lot of people go into sciences with this idea that they're going to go do, you know, they got to get their PhD to go do research, but they're not expecting to be faculty. And I'm sure there are other, you know, professions. I'm in the humanities, I have a very specific mindset in mind. And then of course, people should be really proud and take, instead of this deficit mindset of what is wrong with my application, what's wrong with my CV, start to look at what's right with my application, what's right with my CV. Be proud of all these things you've done. You know, I remember thinking, oh gosh, like I gotta publish more because I'm deficient in publications, and I don't have the right types of publications, and was not also seeing some of the types of things I had been doing, like translations that were really interesting to me. You know, those things I shouldn't be ashamed of just because they're not the ones that were going to get me that tenure track job, or feel like that somehow represented a deficit. Right, so I'm going to shift modes a little bit and talk more practical steps, because you probably would rather hear what you can do yourself as you're looking ahead. First thing is diversify your job search. Don't give up. You don't have to abandon the tenure track concept. It is a lot of work to apply for tenure track jobs. For those of you who haven't done it yet, you really do have to create a lot of documents. You have to articulate your goals in a lot of different ways, and you do have to constantly be looking and tailoring and putting yourself out there. But you can also add in and prioritize and look at other jobs. I want to encourage people, especially in the beginning of your careers, to broaden the scope of your search. So you don't have to take it on all at once. You can incrementally start looking at other things. And to do this, you can really start by taking stock of your skills and your values. You think about what it is you're good at, what it is that you feel good when you do, and what are the things you want to achieve in your life, not just your career, but in your life in general. And that can help you a lot. Maybe you'll find that the types of jobs that you've been looking at actually don't align with your skills and values that much. And then finally, use your research skills. I'm actually stealing this from Susan Martin, who is from the University of Maryland Career Services. She works with graduate and PhD students and helps them research careers. And she says, you have become great researchers. Every single graduate student learns how to do research and use these skills. Apply your research skills and your research mindsets to the jobs that you are looking for, because you know how to investigate, you know how to hypothesize, you put yourself out there and contact other people. And if you have not worked with her or talked to her yet, work with her, talk with her. She is really fantastic. There are a lot of really great people out there who want to help you do this. So I'm going to now show you a couple of things, and then we'll have an activity in a little bit. First, I want to say that if you are really just starting off and you really don't know what you could do outside of academia, I can't tell you exactly what will be right for you because you are not me, but I can tell you a few things that I found interesting as possibilities. And I didn't just jump in and start applying to these jobs, but I just started saying, could I do this and would I like to do it? So a couple that I came across. The first one from a Spanish department, a lot of people become language teachers. They might get a teaching certificate in the state where they want to live, or they might be a private school teacher. And a lot of people have found that satisfying. In the DC area, there are a lot of think tanks, research centers, and there's a position, basically program officer or assistant officer related to Latin America. Same thing with the Caribbean. So those are things that some people start doing as undergraduates. They come out and they start and work their way up in these organizations, but you can do that too. And you might even be able to jump into a higher level right off the bat. These people are writing reports on situations in countries. They are making recommendations based on policy. They are doing research. They are working in teams. So it's a job where people can use their research skills and their expertise. Advocacy is a broad ranging category. Again, I looked around at the DC area to sort of center my search, and there are so many possibilities for working with Latin American, Latino communities, the Caribbean community in this area. Can have to do with housing, it can have to do with education. And a lot of times the requirements for those jobs are focused on skills that you will certainly have developed. If you are working with students or working with faculty, you develop interpersonal skills, language expertise, cultural expertise. Academic publishing is one that didn't occur to me right off the bat, but that's something that people do where they work for a university press. And if you've done any sort of publication or gone through that process, then you have a leg up there. Research librarians are another one that I think would require more education because you would need a master's in library science, but it's something that having a PhD already is valued for librarians at universities. And there are a number of institutions where people can do research. And then the last one I have listed here is academic administration or student support. Academic administration has a lot of different directions to it. You can be doing research about the institution. You can be working in student services, in diversity affairs, working for international students. And what's great about these jobs as a transition job for PhDs is that often they are looking for somebody who has some experience in higher ed, and being a PhD student qualifies you for that. As you know, if you've taught or mentored students, undergraduate students, then you have that experience working in student support. And so these are just some sample possibilities. Now, if you go to the University of Maryland, you have access to, I assume almost everyone coming here today does. But even if you don't, you can access most of these. There's a really great option, the Ph.D. Career Navigator, that you can access. It's an ELMS course that is basically self-navigated. It has different 45-minute lesson chunks and exploration activities that help you start to look through what you want to do. Let's see. So on that page, and I can put this in the chat for you. One of the resources is this Career Research Strategies worksheet, and it's multiple pages long, so I don't have it there, but it really walks you through thinking about what you would like to do outside of academia, thinking about what you want to do inside academia, figuring out who you can talk to. Another aspect of this is identifying transferable skills. So what are the skills that you have that you could use in other areas? And this is a worksheet that comes from Michigan State University, but is available through the UMD Navigator. There are always more online tools. Imagine PhD is a really great one that you can access for free. It has assessments to help you identify what you're really interested in your job. So maybe you're really interested in traveling a lot. On the other hand, maybe you're really interested in settling in one community. There are assessments that help you figure out what you value the most in the life part of the work-life balance. There are also sample job tracks with descriptions, people's personal stories about how they got into what they did, and descriptions of the day-to-day work within an industry. So one I remember is somebody who does editing, and they said, you know, I had this idea of editing in mind. What would editing be? as a work, and I thought it would be really solitary, but actually I was doing a lot of talking to other people. So these are good resources where you get to see what the job is really like through the eyes of someone else who's done it. Beyond the Professoriate is another resource. This, I think you have to pay to get some things, but they do have a lot of free resources. And so the first thing you really should do is create some sort of action plan for yourself. Start by looking at these career services materials. I'll put these in the chat in a second. Start conversations with your peers and mentors. This, for me, is really a call for you to join me in being more open and transparent about what we're looking to do next with our work. I want you to help me destigmatize looking outside of tenure-track jobs. Like I said, I'm still looking at tenure-track jobs. I'm not against tenure-track jobs. It's just that we need to work together to make it normal that people are doing this openly. And I think you'll be surprised that there are a lot of faculty out there who are really supportive. They just might not know how to be more specifically supportive because they haven't done it. This one is, I was resistant to myself, but join LinkedIn, make it work for you. I had a LinkedIn profile and I didn't use it a lot. And then I went, I get better use it. I found so many people who, what I liked about LinkedIn is I could see people I knew and what they had been doing for the past few years. And so I could reach out to them and say, hey, I noticed you worked in educational publishing. Would you be willing to talk to me about that? Which leads me to the next informational interviews. This is a great way to learn about jobs that you might want to have. And it's a great way to also build a network of people who might tell you about jobs that come up. This is something that I was resistant to doing as well, because I was nervous about calling people and admitting, first of all, that I might be looking outside of academia. And I was also nervous about just, I don't know, talking to somebody I didn't know that well. But I actually found that talking to people I didn't know very well was pretty freeing, because they would just fill the space with talk about what they do. And people like talking about themselves. So sending an email and saying, hey, could I talk to you for 30 minutes, 45 minutes? I would call somebody up and it would be a Zoom call or a phone call, because we couldn't meet in person. And I would say, hey, great, thank you for talking to me. I really like to know about how you got, what your career path has been and what it is that you do on a daily basis. And I'll tell you, with about a couple of dozen interviews, I hardly asked questions. People just started telling me things and just fill the space. And I could ask questions about what they were saying. But I found after the first phone call, I really didn't feel nervous anymore, because I wasn't really putting myself out there that much. They were really giving me a really great favor and telling me about what they were doing. And then once you start to see jobs that seem appealing to you, join the professional organizations. Sometimes you can get a very low cost membership or free membership as a student, but there are a lot of professional organizations. You would be shocked how specific they get. And so if you're thinking, maybe I'll become an academic advisor, there's an academic advisor national organization, and not just academic advisor, but like higher education academic advisor versus school counselors, all sorts of things. And then also, I would say apply to jobs even if you don't think they're completely right for you, because applying to the jobs really helps you think of yourself in that position. I applied to a job in January and I thought, they may not give me this job. I may not want this job. I got an interview. They didn't offer me the job. And I don't think I wanted that job. But it was really great, because before I applied to it, I hadn't really given it I hadn't really felt it. It was just an idea, but applying for it, I felt real. And you know what, after that, I could do this number 7, embrace the rejection. So I was like, oh, that's great. You know what, I put myself out there and they didn't offer me the job. I don't, maybe if I had wanted the job, it would have bugged me a little bit more. But I was just like, wow, I put myself out there. That was good. Keep going, keep trying. And again, help change the narrative. Let's make this better. The last thing I want to say before we open things up a little bit more is give yourself permission to do whatever you want. And that's a lot harder than, it's easy to say and hard to do, because we have to face the internal narratives that go beyond just what do you do with this profession, but also what makes a career path worthwhile for you. What is it that you want to do and value? And sometimes it has you have parental voices, maybe you have community voices, you have ideas and expectations for yourself. But you know, you have to give yourself permission, because other people won't, but I will. So here's your permission. Here's your very official certificate of permission to broaden your career search. Make yourself one, put it up on the wall. You can do it. So go ahead. All right. So I want to now switch gears. I'll love to have some question and answer, but I also want to suggest this personal exploration activity, which is the following. If you want to grab a piece of paper, you can go ahead and do it. I think paper is best, and fold it into quarters. And do you remember this from school, the hot dog and the hamburger fold? If you didn't grow up in the United States, this is what people and teachers in the Midwest would tell us to do, right? Put in 4. And in the top quadrant, or whichever square you want, I want you to write a list of things you loved to do when you were a child. So from ages 3 to 18, what are some things that you really love to do? And if anyone's feeling brave, you can add them in the chat for those of you who are able to add in the chat, or you can put those in the Q&A function. No, it's not a question. I'll give you a minute or two. Just write down things that you like to do as a child. For example, I used to love to put on plays for my family. Oh, Diego wanted to be a soccer player. All right, that's awesome. I bet. Sometimes it's the activities you did in school. Sometimes it's the activities you did at home. Were you a doodler? Were you play sports? As you're thinking about these things, next to these words, think about why you liked those, what it was about that appealed to you. And be honest. I'm not going to make you share this part, but you know, I used to like to put on plays for my family, and you know why? I loved performing. I really liked the attention I got performing, and I feel a little bashful about admitting that sometimes, but I loved it. So that's something. Those things are that's a through line to who you are now. And you know, I'm gonna want a job that has a little bit of that performance aspect to it, or if not in my job, in my life. If you're somebody who really liked quiet, personal exploration, artistic work, more introspective attitudes, that's going to be something that really matters to you. But if you think about who you were as a child, especially those years when you weren't as inhibited and so worried about people, what other people thought, that will be helpful to you. Because it helps you think beyond the narratives you come to learn and come to care about. The next block, why did you begin your PhD program or your master's degree program? What were you hoping to achieve? And again, if you want to share that, you certainly can. In the chat or in the Q&A. But what was it? Why did you do it? And think about what value did it have for you? What, beyond your career focus, you know, did it have a symbolic value in your family, in your community? Is this something you were doing for other people? Yeah, to study a topic more closely, personal interest, right? And as you're thinking about this and writing these ideas, why did you pursue this? Why did you start this journey? Are there ideas that you'd like to let go of? There's things that you were doing that you thought you were going to get that maybe you're not going to get, or there's things that you thought mattered that maybe don't matter. I have trouble with this question actually the most, because I can tell you why I started studying Spanish and literature. I wanted to learn Spanish because my grandfather was a native Spanish speaker, but I didn't learn Spanish growing up. And so there was that personal connection. And then I really always loved to read, and I loved close reading. And so those things sort of combined. And then I didn't really want to stop. I just really liked it, but I didn't have necessarily a clear thought in mind. So that's really where I went, oh, tenure track, I can keep doing this forever. And I came to enjoy things. But I like to remember when I started this, it wasn't this clear image I had in mind. Some people are talking about classroom teaching, studying something more closely. So once you identify those reasons you got started, you can also take these and think about where you can put those, where you can do those in other places. Those are the things that you valued about this path. For the last two boxes, they're related. One is, what part of the tenure track job really appeals to you? Now, if you already know you're not interested in tenure track jobs, because some people have very clear directions in other areas, what is it that appeals to you about the job you think you're going to be applying for? So you can write those in. For me, the tenure track, one thing that really appealed to me was the ability to study something, as Noelle put in the comments, study something closely. Really self-directed, in-depth study seemed really cool to me. And being able to talk about it with other people who really care. As you start writing those things down, what did you find appealing? What are the skills that you developed in relation to those things you found appealing? And that can help you start to see specific skills that you can be looking for beyond academia. So if I'm interested in studying things in depth and self-directed study, maybe that's not something you need to do for part of your job. Maybe that's something you do more in your personal life. My father was a banker before he retired, and everybody in his bank job would always say, oh, hey, you could be a professor because you know so much about American history. Yeah, I just am interested in it. So there's that possibility. But then there are also a lot of jobs where you could be doing research on a topic you really care about. And then the last one, and maybe not the best note tip, but what are the things that don't appeal to you about that tenure track job, or the job that you think that you're going to pursue afterward? What's unappealing? And I'll tell you, when I started the PhD, the one real reservation I had was about the publishing. Publishing, oh my gosh. Now, so if that's the issue, is that an issue that is something I can learn, develop skills to get better at and overcome? Or is it something that I'll cope with? Are there trade-offs? There's something that would make that better? Yeah, the last box is, what is unappealing about the tenure track or the job you're thinking you maybe don't, that you will maybe pursue afterward. And the reason I want to encourage you to do that, to really think about what is unappealing about that job you've been doing, is because you can break that down into categories of things that you could improve at and find more tolerable and maybe even learn to enjoy. And those are things that you maybe shouldn't let hold you back. But if there are things that you just, it just really goes against who you are, then maybe that's something to really seriously consider. For me, I actually find the unappealing thing most closely, the clearest example for me was the year before I started my PhD, I worked in a public school as a Spanish teacher. And I loved so many things about that job, but I hated the discipline aspect. high school students, you have to have a certain, there's this power triangle between you, the students, and the other adults in their lives, you know, their guardians and administrators. And I didn't like that. And that was something I thought, oh, you know, I guess I can learn some skills, but I think I probably, you know, I'd really rather not always have to do that. I'd really rather deal with these people one-on-one. And that's what university teaching is. So that helped me think about going and doing the PhD. So thinking about those things that you find unappealing. And then this is not a box, but when you look at this sheet, see what things come together in these 4 quadrants. What are some common things you've been saying over and over again? That's a place to start. And that's a place to think about where you're going to go from here. So thank you so much. I'd be happy to answer some questions. I do see one. And I'd love for those of you in the LASC community who are around, please reach out to me. I'd love to have conversations with you just specifically about what you're interested in doing. So I see Maria has the question, do you find differences in attitudes or narratives between female and male PhD job seekers? Yes, and actually the biggest difference in attitudes and narratives is not just male, female, but it's really about people who, a certain type of, like people who academic jobs were designed for and people who weren't. So not just male, female, but you know, the dissertation success program doesn't have a lot of cisgendered white upper middle class males. It has a lot more men from minoritized groups, people from different gender identifications, people from the non-mold. And so those, and I think the attitude that we see in that group tends to be a feeling of maybe I don't measure up. What do I have to do to overcome deficits? Because of the mold that academia was built around, you know, who were the first scholars who used to hold the power. We've changed the narrative. We have all these really wonderful role models, but to be honest, you know, I don't even really know what the cisgender white heterosexual males are wanting or desiring, because they don't tend to come and ask for help and support. So I can't even really say what their attitudes are. It's just that, you know, at a base level, their attitude might be, I don't necessarily need to. And then I see a comment from Sabrina in the chat about we need to change the narrative about high school and discipline as well. Yeah, and absolutely, that's true too. Like, I'd be curious about more about what you mean by that, but like, not thinking that high school, for me, what this means is like high school is not a step down or a step back. There's so much value to that, and there's so many incredible things that students can benefit from. And like discipline, I think for me, when I think about discipline, it's also maybe a word that's hard to communicate what we mean by that. That could it, for me, it wasn't sort of like punishment. It was more like group building. How do you, and just for me, high school students were a group that you had to work more to build a group and to constantly try to call people in and be part of the group. Whereas college students are sort of default, come in and are like, okay, I'll do what you tell me to do. I'm bought in because I'm paying for this class. And so that's something that, you know, I wouldn't want to push anyone off of the idea of teaching either, because just for me, it was, I wanted to get down to the meat of it and wasn't really great at, didn't find it as appealing to try to be constantly calling the students in. I kind of didn't want to put as much work into that. So I appreciate that comment as well. Other questions or comments?
Lisa, I'll just remind the audience that that we can also use the the audience speak if they want to ask a question.
Yes, please. I would love to have people
We'll
speak.
have to like give them permission here. So if anyone would like to speak, you can like click on raise your hand, and then I'll know who would like to speak, so that we can have more of like a conversation.
For sure, I'd love that.
Thank you very much, Lisa, for your talk. I really enjoyed it. I kept thinking about how, in my case, it was really helpful doing the whole. Even though I went to college in the Midwest, the hot dog and hamburger, I hadn't heard that, and then so it was really helpful for me to see the 4 things in the paper, and in my case, you know, it was like not only the narratives that we here in our departments and from our faculty, but also like, you know, I came in with a narrative already, a very clear narrative of what I wanted to do and like why I wanted to go to the PhD, right? That is like far less common in college to hear that you can go get a PhD to do something else rather than the tenure track, right? So I came with that idea, like I want to go get a master's and then a PhD to go tenure track and teaching. And really the thing for me that brought me in was like teaching, classroom teaching. And then I got to the point where I realized that academia is something else that necessarily for me. So anyways, I guess this was more of a comment than a question, but I just wanted to share that. Yeah, thank you.
I'm so glad. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that. It's good to get the feedback about how it reflected in how you were thinking about it. I see Keisha's asking about jobs at the National Foreign Language Center. I have not. I think that if you speak another language, there's a variety of jobs. Another language. Wow, that was very English centric. But if you speak multiple languages, you know, I have studied a lot of languages. Knowing multiple languages gives you a ton of different possibilities. Translation is one. Interpretation is one that requires more learning and skill to be able to do that, the speaking component, but there are a lot of opportunities in those fields. Then there's the teaching. There is, if you've done any teaching in terms of like teaching a foreign language, or even if you've learned a foreign language, a second language, very well, you probably have an intuitive idea of how to teach a second language. And what can be good about that is that you could also work in like education materials production, which is something I hadn't thought of at all before. So there are some different things in those related field. People are talking about initiatives around government work for PhD students. So many interesting government type positions. If you are interested in working for the government, know first of all, government can mean a lot of things. Like it could mean working for the CIA or the FBI or the Department of Defense, but it also means the Library of Congress, the Smithsonian institutions, the National Endowment for the Humanities. So go on USA Jobs, create an account and start looking. Some jobs you do have to be a US citizen for or have permanent residency. Other jobs don't. But within that website, there is a track you can click. There's a filter button that is for recent graduates. And that includes undergraduates, graduate students, anyone from who's and also entry-level jobs. So that can help you find things. The trick with the USA Jobs is that you want to start well in advance because it takes them a long time to process all of the materials. So, you know, it wouldn't be crazy for certain industries for you to wait a whole year to hear back or 6 months, even though they try to reduce that time. Oh yeah, so thanks, Sabrina. Yeah, it's the not necessarily diminishing high school, but stigma around high school and young people. I think that that's a really good point. For those of you who are not sure about the high school thing, would it be right for you? My best tip is to go volunteer to work in a high school. If you speak another language and you can go work in a language class, oh my goodness, language teachers would love to have somebody help in a language class. When I was teaching, the 1 year I taught high school Spanish, I would have loved to have a volunteer come and speak Spanish with me in front of the students, to have somebody to model Spanish with. And that's a great way to get to know people. I think people tend to have if you're interested in teaching, there's usually people have age orientations. So I would prefer to work with adults or small children and up to middle school. But for some reason, like middle school to high school, just not appealing to me. Other people love that. You know, both of my grandparents were high school teachers and they loved that. I go, high school. I think it's because when I was in high school, I was like irritated with people. It's kind of irritated with people in high school. So I kind of go, oh, high school. But, you know, it depends on your personality. And there's so many cool things that you can do, especially in this DC area. Again, there's IB schools and the International Baccalaureate. We have private schools. There are a lot of AP programs. But if you're interested in adventure, there are agencies like Carney Sando. So Carney, the same way as my second last name, Sando, that's a placement agency, and they help place people who are interested in languages find jobs. I see Sophia says, something you've been wondering, do you think it's possible to come back to academia if you get a job outside for a couple of years? This is a really good question. I think that it really, really depends on your field and what you are doing. I actually really felt concerned that taking a step outside of academia could close it off, because it is hard to convince other people that you've been keeping up with the research. But I'm not, you know, and I know Sophia, you're from the same basic field as I am, so it may be harder. However, if you know, it depends on what you're doing outside of it. And I think, you know, if you're going to go do something like for a literary department, if you're going to go include creative writing as part of what you're doing, then that might be something that would be easy to get back in. But the best way to find out, I think, is to really look around and talk to people from other fields and departments. I want to, before I go to Victor's question, Christopher has his
exactly. And Mauricio.
And Mauricio, they have their hands
so
up.
let me allow, I have to click here.
Hi, it's Christopher. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yes, we can hear you.
So I wanted to say two things along the line of schools. My mother, for example, works in a dual language program in an elementary school in a district that's trying to build a K through 12 dual language program to accommodate the huge Latinx community there. But the biggest problem they have is one of personnel, of finding people with the language skills and interest to teach it. So to me, that seems like an indication of a vacuum, of a need for people with the kinds of skills that a lot of the LASC crowd kind of has. But it also makes me think about how K through 12 is really the cultural vanguard. That's where so much of what I think a lot of us are working to change in culture, globally, locally, it's actually being formed in K through 12. So for people who really want to have an impact on cultural change, K through 12 is a place to do it. And then just thinking about like my own interests in like trying to imagine myself, well, what kind of work could I do? And this is just a comment, I guess, for my own benefit of unloading my soul on sympathetic ears, is kind of a lot of anxiety about US American, in particular, work culture. The grind and hustle attitude, we kind of have that in academia, but with less surveillance, I think. So the grind and hustle culture, the 9-to-5 culture, and also in academia, it's easier to find, from my experience, it's been easier to find pockets where, like, not being a cisgender white male, you can be comfortable. But I don't know, at least my view of what life is like outside academia is it would be harder to find a company where, like, I could feel comfortable going to work and feel safe. anyways, I don't know if anybody has thoughts on that, but just wanted to say that's a reservation I have. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa, for this talk.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's really valid. One thing it doesn't solve that concern that's really valuable, a really important, valid concern, and one I think we really have to value. Another opportunity that I didn't talk about is really some sort of independent work where you're your own boss. And that could take a lot of different forms. So some sort of consulting, creating your own company. People have joked with me this year, oh, you could become a dissertation writer consultant, because I've been working with this dissertation, those people that you could contract outside of the university. So yeah, I mean, I could if that's, but it's something you have to look at your skills and think, what could I do? If could I be an entrepreneur? Could I start my own job? Could I do that? That could be a way to go from there. We have so many great comments, and I know we have to wrap up. So can we have Mauricio go ahead and speak?
Oh, thank you, Lisa. Hi. This won't take much time. So my question is about, from your experience, if you have some kind of idea of the narrative for those foreigners who want to become tenure track or other kind of jobs in the US, because I all my life I've heard some of these stories of some very few people who become professors in the United States or who work in other kind of cultural institutions. And I ask this because recently I've been more and more aware that especially for those who work in the Latin American studies, history, or other fields, there's this kind of a world market now. We can find jobs in Germany, in England, and of course in Latin America and the Caribbean, including the United States. So if you have some kind of an idea of how this narrative is working now, what these people think about it, or what are the fears and anxieties and...
Yeah, that's really great. I think that coming from a Spanish department where I've had a lot of colleagues come from Latin America and Spain, and then also I've worked with a lot of students from places, China, a lot of Chinese graduate students, and of course, places in Europe and Asia, the Caribbean, Latin America, that there is, the United States is this very seemingly desirable place to work. But also I've heard some really interesting stories of people expanding their job search globally and finding that really beneficial, finding that really gratifying. Someone I worked with last year got a job in Australia, a Chinese woman. And by work with, I mean, she was in a writing group with me, we weren't like working together on anything, but she said, I really would like to live in Australia, so I'm going to apply there. There's always those extra concerns that I'm not as well versed in about getting the permission to work in a certain place, but some countries are, easier to navigate that process with. And I think it would be really great for anyone who's open to moving and transitioning to a different location, especially if you've already come to the United States from another country. Looking someplace else gives you a lot of possibilities, and you will find that different institutions operate differently. There are different, the UK has different norms of publication and tenure, things like that, those might be things that maybe align more with your values or less. But those are definitely cool ideas. And we know with the pandemic that there have been a lot more teaching positions that are virtual and remote. And that is something that people can think about as well. It's hard to say how long those things will last and if they would be ever a permanent type of job, but it's definitely something to consider and explore.
All right, thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you, Lisa, for your amazing talk. Thank you, everyone who engaged and commented in the chat, asked questions, and all that. We're going to have a quick break now, 5 minutes, and then we're going to start promptly at 11 with our next panel titled "What Pieces Can't We Put Together? Fragments in Our Archives, Memories, and Histories." We have 3 presentations at 11, so stick around. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.